Hi, everyone. My name is Bella, and I'm the co-vice president of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Graduate Student Government Association, or GSGA. In that role, the other vice president and myself serve as point people for celebrations, issues, and initiatives relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This school year, we've been partnering with the Office of Spiritual and Religious Life to host Lunch and Learn events celebrating holidays across diverse faiths. Today, we're thrilled to introduce Assistant Dean of Worship and Music, Dean Kalia Williams, Dean of Religious Life, the Reverend Greg McGonigal, and Rebel El-Haj, who's the co-president of the Catholic Graduate Student Association, as well as Zane Locken, who is the treasurer of the Catholic Graduate Student Association. Today, they will be discussing their personal sentiments and experiences with the upcoming Christian holidays, Ash Wednesday, Lent, and Easter. We encourage questions, and we'll be having a Q&A session at the end, so please send any you have in the chat box. And with that, we'll turn it over to our panelists. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Bella. And many thanks to you and the GSGA again for hosting this wonderful series on religious diversity and different holidays and seasons that we celebrate in the Emory community. I think we've learned a lot over the course of the year already about many important holidays, and very much looking forward to today's conversation, which is covering a lot of ground spiritually. Today we are entering into, well, today is Mardi Gras, in fact, Fat Tuesday, which is celebrated in some parts of the Christian tradition as kind of lead up and last chance, a celebratory day before the more solemn season of Lent, which leads into culmination at Holy Week, and then the celebration of Easter and the Easter season on the other side of that. But before Ash Wednesday, which is tomorrow, we really wanted to have a chance to lift up these holidays and the season, to talk about what it means, and not only in a textbook way, but to really talk about how it's celebrated in the Emory community, either usually when we're on campus, or how some of us celebrate with our families and friends when we're not on campus. And so delighted to have such wonderful panelists with us today. And without further ado, why don't we just dig into to discussing some of these holidays. And so I might ask you, Dean Williams, if you would be willing to just kind of lead us off by describing the arc of holidays of how we get from Ash Wednesday to Easter, in whichever way you would like to do. Welcome again.
Sure. Thank you, Dean McGonigal, and thank you for having me today. It's wonderful to be a part of this discussion. So I'll try to do like a 90-second summary of the movement between Ash Wednesday all the way to Easter, and just share a little bit of what it means. And again, it will be completely summarized, and there will be particularities that I think may come out later on in our conversation as it relates to different traditions and how we really lean into particular points of the season for different traditions. So essentially, Ash Wednesday marks the start of the Lenten season, and it is the also kind of known as the Day of Ashes, which historically kind of started and was prominent within the Catholic Church, but it has also become a really important day in some Protestant traditions as well. And ultimately, it's a day of repentance where Christians really confess their sins and really profess their devotion to God, and launches them into the season of Lent that spans 40 days, not counting the Sundays. If you count the Sundays, then you're really talking about 45-day seasonal period. On Ash Wednesday, you will find individuals who observe Ash Wednesday will have ashes put on their foreheads, right? And so there's the implementation of ashes, which is a reminder. And oftentimes in that particular ritual, what's heard is from dust you came and from dust you return. And so it's a reminder of our own mortality, and a reminder for us of just our own kind of our own humanity, essentially. And so that marks the beginning, and I'll breeze through that one, and we can talk a little more specifically about Ash Wednesday a little later. Then we move into Lent. And as I said, Lent is a journey. So Lent is the season that takes us up to Easter. And it's a season that's really focused around reflection and preparation before the celebration of Easter. When we get to Easter, what we're celebrating for the Christian tradition is the resurrection of Jesus. And so Lent really prepares us for that celebration. Oftentimes, when you enter into Lent, there is a giving up of something. Many people will give up particular types of foods or particular activities or habits to kind of journey through. And it's really a preparing to celebrate the resurrected Christ. Then we get to Easter, and Easter's the big celebration. Most think of Easter as that one day where we come together and celebrate. I think of Easter and have always like to remind people, Easter is really a season. So Easter is not just the one Sunday, but there's the Easter season, and the Easter season celebrates the resurrection of Christ, celebrates those who saw the resurrected Christ, and it kind of takes us through a whole season until we get to Pentecost. And so there's a whole season of Easter. So we have Ash Wednesday, which is the one day, the Lenten season, which is about 40 days of preparation. Then you have Easter Sunday or Resurrection Sunday that leads us into then the Easter season, which is the entire season in which we celebrate the resurrected Christ in many different ways. That's my summary, and we can dive more into it, Dean McGonigal, as you said.
Thank you so much. Beautifully done. Thank you. Thank you for laying that out for us. And I might just ask Zane and Rebel, if you, maybe in your tradition, and I think you may come from even different traditions within Christianity, maybe you can share that. But do you celebrate Ash Wednesday? You know, is that an important day to you? And maybe what does the Lenten season, you know, mean for you?
So I think, Zane, it might be better if you start. You'll see why.
Okay. Thanks for volunteering me. No, definitely Ash Wednesday is an important day to me, as it is an important day for a lot of Christians, particularly and within that Catholics as well too. No, it marks the day, as Kalia said, that it's the beginning of Lent, in which we are preparing ourselves for the Lord's passion and resurrection. And to me, it also and it begins the season of me kind of, and I guess a lot of Christians giving up things and maybe becoming less attached to the material things, and then becoming more attached or growing more close to God for those next 40 days.
Yeah, and the reason why I wanted Zane to go first, so Zane's background is he's Roman Catholic. I belong to one of the Eastern Catholic churches, the Maronite Church. So for us, we don't celebrate Ash Wednesday. We actually celebrate Clean Monday, meaning for us, the Lenten season began yesterday. And it's pretty much the same concept, right? It's a very similar concept, but the calendar is a little bit different. So we don't take Sundays off when it comes to fasting, right? And our Lenten season goes all the way up really through Palm Sunday. And then for that Holy Week, for all of Holy Week, you're still fasting and there's still other obligations, but it's not technically a part of the 40 days of Lent. That said, that's more, I don't want to say it's more of like a technicality, but in terms of like what we actually do, in terms of what our practices are, it still has the same meaning as like what Zane described. It still has all the same core values. Some of the fasting might be a little bit different. For example, we don't eat anything before noon. The only thing you can consume before noon is water. And again, we do not break fast on Sundays. But in terms of like what it means spiritually and practically, it is about, prayer. It's about coming closer to God. It's about reflecting on the season. So it maintains all those same aspects with the Roman Catholic Church.
That's really great. Thank you both. And Rebel, thank you for bringing up the Orthodox traditions too, or the Eastern Catholic traditions, but also it reminds me of the Orthodox traditions in Christianity, which sometimes get left out in terms of our calendars and so forth, because they're not maybe as numerically numerous communities in the United States per se. And calendars are slightly different depending on how they're calculated, often for certain holidays. So that's a really important thing for people to be aware of. But also the richness and the beauty of the fact that there are these different expressions and different ways of, beginning a penitential season, beginning a season of reflection and spiritual growth. I really love what you said, Zane, too, about the idea of moving from a material, focus to more of a spiritual focus, and maybe through some of these practices of, I think you both mentioned fasting, and others that are mentioned include like, works of charity, and prayer and scripture. And I'm wondering, Dean Williams, is there anything more you would say, like particularly about Protestant traditions around, around Lent or these holidays? Does it would you say it differs from Catholic practice? I know you lead the Baptist Studies program at Candler, but you're also support everyone. So curious if you might say anything in particular about that.
Absolutely. So there is a difference in Protestant ways of observing, and the first difference is it's not something that is a staple to every Protestant community. This is something that some communities have leaned into and others don't. Others will wait and then just kind of observe Holy Week, but not necessarily go through the full Lenten journey. I am seeing now that there are more communities that are intentionally leaning into Lent. So when I think about the Baptist tradition as a whole, not a whole lot of Baptist churches are observing Lent. And I remember introducing it to our own congregation, and it was kind of like, what is this, right? What do you mean Ash Wednesday? And so now we hold Ash Wednesday services, and we take our whole community through a Lenten journey of fasting, and that looks different. I think that's the other piece too, is there is within the Protestant tradition, there's this really kind of loose way of thinking through the fasting practice. And so it's not always food related, and it can be, it really centers around like individuals, either a community will say as a whole church, we're going to fast from whatever, right? Or they'll say, hey, each individual pick whatever it is that you want to kind of give up during this season, and you do that, and just know that you're doing it in community with a church that's also, others in the church that's also doing it. So there's a little more flexibility. It's not necessarily like a rubric of how we enter into the fasting in the Lenten season. But I will say the more prominent part of this whole arc of the seasons is the Holy Weeks season for the Protestant churches. And that, even in that though, it is Maundy Thursday and Good Friday. And so not every Protestant community stops to observe Holy Tuesday, or not every Protestant community does kind of the Easter Vigil on Saturday, right? So there's some difference. But when I think about it, like Maundy Thursday is a huge day, and that usually will commence through the practice of foot washing and a community having Eucharist or Holy Communion together. And then on Good Friday, that can look very different. And I found culturally within Protestant churches, that looks very different. So in particular cultures, there's a whole Good Friday service, and there's 7 preachers, and they are preaching the 7 last words of Jesus, or 7 perspectives from the cross, or something like that. Other services will just kind of have a service of music and kind of centering or reflection on Good Friday that really marks the day that Christ was crucified, right? And so there's the Maundy Thursday marking the Last Supper, which then through foot washing is honoring Christ washing the feet of the disciples, and leaning into this theme of love and of service. And then we move into that Friday that is really recognizing the day that Christ was crucified, and that usually those services end in silence and end in stripping the altars and all of that within some of our Protestant traditions as well. But I would honestly say the big difference that I see is like there's a whole wide range of how individuals do or don't move through the Lenten journey of fasting and reflection and kind of the spiritual disciplines there. It's like a 50-50 split when I think of the different communities that I've worked with.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. And I might just zero in on fasting a little bit right now because it is the lunch hour, and many of our bodies might be, at least in the Eastern time zone, we might be thinking about food right now. And I'm just curious. Some people have said, well, we are in this time of COVID-19 where folks have given up so much, or lost so much, had to give up so much. And of course, Christianity isn't the only spiritual tradition that has the practice of fasting. It's shared by other traditions as well. But I'm curious, maybe Zane and Rebel, if there's anything that you would share, for people who aren't Christian to know about either fasting or abstaining from meat is sometimes done, or sometimes, as you've said, abstaining from, any, food or drink maybe. Just a little bit more about the purpose of that, is it ever helpful for people to support you with that, or just be aware on certain days?
So I guess I can just give a little bit of background on I guess why fasting was chosen of all things. So as we've already talked about and has been described like at length, this is a time of coming closer to God, and really Christianity gets a lot of its fasting practices from ancient Judaism itself, which is common throughout the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament, there's a lot of fasting is mentioned as well. Even practiced by Jesus. And Rebel and I were discussing this earlier. Essentially, essentially, the Christian faith kind of derives Lent from the 40 days or Jesus's 40 days in the desert when he was fasting and being tempted by the devil. And so during this time, he ate no food and drank no water, and he was out in the desert essentially just praying to God. And so, and during this, like I said, the devil was tempting him with food itself, trying to get him to put God to the test, and also offering him essentially the world itself, all material things to him, to which he rebukes the devil 3 times. And so from this, I think the most important line throughout, and I think it's Matthew chapter 4, the very beginning of that. The most important line, which I think is kind of the basis of fasting, is one does not live off bread alone, but off of every word that comes out of the mouth of God. And so from this, that's the true, I think, spirit of fasting within the Christian tradition, is that when we put away these things, we really need to put away everything that is not God, and essentially make him the priority. And really, at the end of the day, even food is secondary to him. And so during this time of fasting, we cleave to him rather than food itself. And so, Rebel, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's about as good of an explanation as you can get on the origins in terms of like practically how it plays out. Yeah, obviously it's not the easiest thing to do, especially, depending on how, not I won't say how seriously you take it, but what your particular customs are. I know a lot of my family, again, they don't eat anything before noon every single day, which may not sound like the hardest thing, but when your day starts at 4 a.m. sometimes, all right, that's that's a long time to go with nothing but water. And the one thing that I've always personally, I do not like fish. And on Friday, you are not supposed to eat any meat. And fish, you are allowed to eat. It doesn't qualify based off of the standards which are laid out. Really, that also goes back to some Old Testament and some, customs from Judaism. But on Fridays, it's a lot of pizza for me. A lot of pizza, a lot of cheese pizza throughout all of Lent, because I do not eat fish. So, that's a little bit of annoyance, I will say. That's a little bit of temporal suffering. But as Zane said, the purpose, though, is it's just a reminder of what really matters, right? And what really matters isn't in the material world; it's in the next. So I do think it's it's a 40, 50-day season, depending on how you measure it, 40 official days, and then some obviously Holy Week and whatnot. But those days are really meant to be used to come closer to God, to reflect on God, and in that sense, it's definitely worth any trouble it causes.
Thank you so
Greg,
much.
can I jump in
Yeah,
here really quick? Because
please.
I think there's one conversation that I've been grateful to be a part of this season as we are leading up. And you've made a really good point of in this time, how much we have given up and just how much we've lost and how much we've had to sacrifice and to give up. And so there are communities that are having conversations now of reimagining what that looks like during this Lenten season. And some have thought about maybe it's not so much of a giving up, but an intentional way of being or an intentional way of doing something that's different, right? And so that becomes a different way to think about it for this season that I think might be very helpful for those who are struggling with this idea of I have to yet sacrifice something else, right? I have to sacrifice how I'm eating or give up something in this season. And so that's a really fresh way of looking at it that I've appreciated hearing in some communities, of just leaning into being intentional in certain ways or doing something versus the idea of giving up something.
That's very helpful too. And I think my understanding is part of it too is that the Lenten preparations also point toward the celebration of Easter, which is a time of festivity and really sharing delicious food and and sharing the joy of Christ's resurrection. And it just makes me think: are there particular traditions, for each of you, either through the Lenten journey or into Holy Week and Easter, which is the kind of culmination, that just are really very meaningful to you, that you kind of look forward to every year, or they're just a special moment, either in church or with family, that that is unique to this time of year?
Yeah, so for me, there's 2 days that really stick out in particular. One is Palm Sunday, which in the Maronite Church is I would say, a larger celebration that you would see in the Roman Catholic Church. It has a large cultural significance. So most Maronites are going to be Lebanese, and in Lebanon on Palm Sunday, outside of everyone going to Mass, you get new clothes, right? It's a time in which it's like, and in Palm Sunday, it celebrates Christ's entry into Jerusalem, his triumphant entry into Jerusalem. But it's a time, at least in the Lebanese community, the Maronite community, in which a lot of people get new shoes, new clothes, and it has again a large cultural significance. So I always enjoyed that. And the other one, I particularly enjoy the Good Friday services, and I think there's a certain solemnity to them that you rarely see throughout the rest of the year. Like when you think about what it's actually celebrating, you are celebrating the crucifixion, which can seem like a weird thing to celebrate from the outside. You are celebrating a man being tortured and then put to death, right? But when you understand what that eventually leads to in the resurrection, in salvation, there's a certain beauty to it that I think is difficult to match.
Yeah, I have to agree too with the, particularly for me, the Good Friday services. And like you said, Bell, there's a sort of reverence and understanding that really isn't there the rest of the year, where I guess the whole point and theme of Christianity is that Jesus died and resurrected for us to save us from our sins, so that we might have eternal life. However, this is the prelude to the Easter Sunday on Good Friday, to where he himself was put to death and died for us. And I think really there you get a real appreciation, or out of that service, out of that Mass, out of any of the entire year, you get a real appreciation of just the love that God has for us. I guess just the pain and suffering he went through. And I think even then the priest's vestments are black only on that day alone, which really just reflects just we're a people that celebrate, we're a tradition that celebrates life, but on this one day we reflect on the Lord's death.
So I will echo. I think we all kind of are centering in on the same, which goes to show how impactful Good Friday is. For me, it is one of one of the services that I really, really look forward to, one, in the Black church tradition, it's a huge deal. And this is one where you have, like I mentioned earlier, the seven preachers that come together and they all preach sermonettes, and the way we do it, we bring different communities together. So it's an ecumenical experience. And it's an opportunity for us to sit in the reality of Good Friday. And I think over the years in my own communities, we've worked to really not rush to the celebration of Sunday, of Resurrection Sunday, but to sit in the meaning and the powerful message that comes through Good Friday, that comes through the death of Christ, right? What does that really mean to have the crucified Messiah? How do we celebrate that, lament that? And I'm actually thinking a lot about it this year, because lament's a real thing for all of us all the time, but it's serious and it's a heavy thing for us this year. And so how do we bring in the lament of Good Friday in conversation with the lament of just our world right now and all the loss that we've had, and how do we do that in a very meaningful way that then positions us to be able to celebrate the hope that does come on Resurrection Sunday? So that's always one of my favorite. The other is Sunday, Easter Sunday itself, right? Resurrection Sunday itself. Again, in my own tradition, in the Black Baptist tradition, that's typically where you get all the kids and they come together and they have all their Easter speeches. And it's just the most amazing and beautiful thing to see the involvement, this intergenerational involvement, while churches tend to do it all year long, but like that's where it's highlighted in a lot of churches, and it's just beautiful to see. So those would be my two highlights that I always look forward to.
Wow, thank you all so much. It's just incredibly rich to reflect on these holidays with you, their meanings, and also the different ways that they're celebrated. I'm curious, as we kind of conclude, is there anything that sort of that's on your mind that you would add about helping people to understand the meaning of the season, these holidays that are coming? Of course, they raise different themes, and and we're talking about a significant period of time, but that's all connected in a certain way too. Anything else that you would share before we close?
I would just say that for anyone that has questions, for anyone that's curious about what the season means to practicing Christians and Catholics, just ask. If you want to know something, ask somebody. Maybe attend a mass. If you want to dig more into it. It's normally a very welcoming community, and we always love to invite new people through the door, regardless of what your background is. So in that aspect, if you have, again, if you have questions, if you're curious, just reach out and ask.
That's so great. I might add as well, we didn't talk too much about how we generally celebrate these holidays at Emory, and part of that is because it's such an unusual year. We know so many people are away from campus. We were just talking about the background of my photograph is Cannon Chapel, and none of us is there right now, even though many of us would be usually. But I can just say our office tries to make known the different services that are happening in various Christian communities throughout Lent and Holy Week and Easter. Our office, OSRL, does host a Palm Sunday service at 11 a.m. on Palm Sunday, which will be online. Actually, our Dean Emerita of Religious Life, Susan Henry Crow, is going to be with us that day and preaching, which we're so excited for. She leads kind of social justice work for the Methodist Church in Washington, D.C. And so that's a day of reflecting on spirituality and politics, and what faith calls us to do in the public square. So we're looking forward to hearing her. And then we'll have a Good Friday service online with Lynn Pace, who's our chaplain at Oxford College. I think it's at noon. And then Easter Sunday service on Easter Sunday at 11 a.m. with Dr. Walter Fluker, who's newly returned to Candler School of Theology and the area of moral leadership. But I know there are other services going on. Catholic and Candler School of Theology also has, I believe, a at least a Monday, Thursday service that we'll promote as well. Is that at 11:10?
Yeah, so during Holy Week, we will actually have we will have our Holy Tuesday prayers around the cross service at 11:30. And then that Thursday we will have a Maundy Thursday service. It will look a little different as all services have these days, and that's as well at 11:30. And we don't do a Good Friday service, so those will be our two services for the week of our Holy Week. And then along the way through Lent, we have our normal worship services on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11:30, but we also are building in intentional Lenten devotions, from prayers on Mondays to devotion time on Fridays. Those can be found on our social media sites on Instagram and on Facebook, to just help those who are choosing to journey through Lent in an intentional way this year, to give a little bit of guide and sensory moments for that journey.
That's great. That's fantastic. Anything from the Emory Catholic community that you folks would add?
Yeah, just in terms of like what we're doing specifically, I know the Catholic Center holds Mass every Sunday, I believe at 11 a.m. You are more than welcome to, we would love for people to join us. We do ask that you sign up in advance because of, social distancing requirements, although it is being held outdoors. So, we're taking, the proper precautions. There will be, I believe, ashes being distributed tomorrow for Ash Wednesday, I believe at 7:30 a.m. And then for Holy Week specifically, on Easter Sunday, there will be a mass being held at the usual time on Sunday, and then we will be having online events as well on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So if anyone would like to join, we welcome all.
Fantastic. And we'll definitely make sure to get the word out to the campus on those. The Catholic Center does an amazing job with its communications, but we'll lift up whatever you put out. And so grateful for this conversation. Thank you all so much. I think it was a rich one. We could certainly go much deeper into each of these traditions and holidays, but I think you've given us a lot to think about as we begin to journey into the next several weeks. So I will turn it back to you, Bella. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Thank you all for joining us today, and thanks again to our panelists. Today's event is the first religious holiday lunch and learn of the semester, so stay tuned to GSGA's newsletter and social media for details on upcoming monthly lunch and learns and other things that we have going on. To see a recording of all the religious holiday learning series, including this one, please visit religiouslife.emory.edu and click their programs tab. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.